Hello and welcome to this video lecture of Chapter 2, Starting the Project. So let's get started. Our agenda, should the project be started? That's the first question. And then secondly, the actions and process of launching the project. Just a reminder of the project lifecycle, we are in the initiating phase and Chapter 2 is dedicated completely to the initiating phase. This phase is usually relatively short in duration, but its value is very high. So let's look to see what we do. So as we saw before on a previous slide, should the project be started, that's results in the creation of the business case. Secondly, launching the project, that's where we see the project charter being created. So let's go on. So in terms of the should the project start, that's often a question that is raised is what is the value of this project? So that question leads us to looking at, if the answer is yes, there are often a number of different options that may be taken. There might be a simple approach. There might be a complex approach. It might be an expensive, a less expensive, an automated, less automated. So there's all kinds of different variations. And if we took all of those options, all of those variations into detailed planning, we would be planning for a very long time, and it would not be effective. So instead, what we do is we do some preliminary analysis as a result of the business case in order to select the main option or the option to be pursued. So the first step is to consider these different options, or you can think of them as paths that may be taken. Look at the image on the right, and you see a fork in the road, or in this path, and we see that we can go left or we can go right. And sometimes there's maybe a third or a fourth option. And so that's where we are with the business case, is we're early in the project and we're looking at which path do we want to take. So let's look at the business case. And this is accomplished through a business case. When creating it, we should look at two things. One is the estimated costs. And they are estimated. This is early in the project. There's not necessarily a lot of information. So this is often a high-level estimate, often called a ballpark estimate. It relies upon past experience, perhaps having performed similar projects in the past, but we get an idea of what the costs would be. And then we compare those to the estimated benefits of what we're going to achieve and what benefit we're going to get as a result of this project. And then we compare those. And again, for each option, we'll do a comparison. And it's through that comparison that we're able to select the optimal option. Estimated costs come in different form. They may be tangible. For example, tangible costs are actual dollar costs. Things like the cost of materials or the cost of labor would be tangible costs. We can specifically measure them. Or they might be intangible costs. For example, if you miss a deadline on your project, determining the cost of that in terms of perhaps damaged reputation or lost future business may be difficult to measure, but nonetheless exists. Estimated benefits may also be tangible. For example, one benefit of the project could be increased sales. So perhaps a 5% increase in your sales can be measured because we can calculate the profit that will create, which is tangible, or they may be intangible. For example, an increased benefit of a successful project may be greater brand recognition, but determining what that will mean in terms of future sales or greater retention of customers is sometimes harder to estimate. So that makes them intangible. But nonetheless, whether they're tangible or intangible, they are still costs and they are still benefits, and that's what we need to look at. So at this point, I invite you to access the case study update in your chapter, Creating the Business Case. So please pause the video at this point and please read that Creating the Business Case study update in your textbook. So when you are finished that, come on back here. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at the business case and see what happened during that case study update. So during the case study, three options were developed by the project manager, who her name is Sophie. One was a soft product launch, so minimal promotion, relying primarily on word of mouth. The second was a moderate product launch, option A plus additional promotion through existing communication channels. And option C was a full product launch, which is B plus the development of a promotional video and creation of trade show materials. Now, where these options came from would have been the project manager's experience. She may have met with various people within her organization. Um, it may have been the combination of those that crystallized into these three options. The question is now which option to choose. And so now what she's going to do is to compare the costs and the benefits of each. So, first of all, she estimates the cost. And these tend to be, as we mentioned before, tend to be rough estimates as the details of the project are not known. And for the case study project, just to simplify the estimating process, Sophie decided to consider two measures of the cost. One would be the budget that would be required, the actual budget, salary costs, cost of materials, and so on. And this is a tangible cost. And the other would be the risk that the product launch would not be ready by the due date required by the project sponsor. So this is an intangible cost. So for each one, Sophie would have thought about each of these costs. She may talk to others, her project team, other resources that she may have in the organization. So one way or another, she determined that the tangible required budget was $10,000, and the risk of delay for the soft product launch is relatively small. It's not zero, but it was seen as kind of 1 in 100, which is 1%. Now remember, these are estimates. These are not guarantees. They're estimates. The moderate project launch, given the work required, was estimated to be $25,000, so significantly more budget and an increased risk of delay of 5%. And then finally, full launch, $60,000 budget and a 10% risk of delay. So if you look at this, if we only looked at costs, we'd say, well, gee, the option A requires the least amount of budget and the smallest risk. So it looks like option A is our best option. Well, we need to look at benefits. So let's estimate those. Like costs, these tend to be rough estimates. It's very difficult to estimate future benefits with absolute accuracy. But for the case study project, Sophie decided again to consider two measures. First is the increase in the company's market share, and the other is the increase in the company's brand recognition. So she looked at two different measures of benefit. So going back to the board, and again, she would have used her own experience. She would have analyzed things, talked to others in the organization, and so on, done various research. But from this, she determined or estimated that the soft product launch would have a 0% increase in the market share and would have no increase in brand recognition. In effect, it would maintain things. In effect, not go down. Because remember, there's competitors of DecoCam. They are introducing new products. So the benefit of option A is that we don't lose any ground to our competitors. Option B, she felt that there would be a 3% increase in market share and a moderate increase in brand recognition. And then finally, option C, a 6% increase in market share and a significant increase in the brand recognition. So now the challenge becomes to compare these. Certainly option A has lower costs, but lower benefits. Option C has the highest costs, but the highest benefits. And that's often the way the equation works. The challenge now is to determine which one. Well, in the business, in the business case, that in the case study, the winner was as follows. The final step was to select the desired option, and this often involves not only the project manager, but also members of the project team, the project sponsor, other key stakeholders, and so on. And for our case study, and really for the rest of the course, the selected option was option C, the full product launch. Now, it's not always the case that the biggest option is selected. Many times it might be the smallest, it might be the middle. So this is just in this case the full product launch was selected, but this is not to imply that it's always the most expensive option that is selected. You can view the completed business case in the textbook, and here's an example of it. You can see the various information that's included, the name of the project, some background information about Deco Productions and why we have this project, the business need or opportunity that is being fulfilled, which is important information. Then you can see the three options there that you saw on previous screens. You can see the cost-benefit analysis that was done. Again, we saw this previously on screens, but this is now all documented in this report. And you can see the recommendation that in this case, option C is recommended by the project manager. But as you heard or as you read in the case study, the project manager recommends, but then takes that to the project sponsor for the final decision. And that's often the case that of a key overall decision like this, we need to involve the project sponsor. They're often involved for these high-level decisions. Okay, we're now on to the next step, which is launch the project. We now have a project. We have a full product launch. We need to start moving, start planning. However, in many companies, particularly large ones, they often have many projects occurring at the same time. Like picture a company like this highway or like these roads that are being shown, and this is the kind of congestion that is in many organizations with the different projects and initiatives going on. So there's often a whole lot going on. And so many stakeholders in the company may not even be aware that the project exists. And that's a problem. Yes, the project sponsor knows and the project manager knows, but many stakeholders are not even aware of it. So what do we do? Well, the answer is the project charter. This is a document that announces that the project exists and authorizes the project manager to proceed with the project. The project manager often does not have the formal authorization to spend the budget or to acquire resources and so on. So the project charter serves as a way to authorize that project manager. The project sponsor is giving the project manager the authority through that charter. So that's why it's very, very important. It includes information such as the project's goals and objectives, the project budget, the project sponsor and project manager as to who they are, a list of some overall key stakeholders, some overall project milestones. Now remember, a milestone is a key event or a significant date where something is going to happen in the project, and some overall project risks. Now remember, we're at very early days in the project. We have not done our detailed planning, so this is not a complete description of the project. It's not necessarily all of our stakeholders. It's not a detailed budget. This is not a project schedule, and it's not a full risk analysis. So this is early days. A project charter is relatively short, maybe a couple of pages and that sort of idea, because we really just haven't had a chance to do extensive planning yet. And so we can't know that. Next step, please refer again to your textbook and go to the case study section, creating the project charter. So please read that and then come on back here when you're done. Okay, so you're back. Here is the resulting document that was created. Now, this information, the project charter, by the time we get to this point, is often documenting the decisions and discussions and so on that have already been performed. So let's just run through the project charter. We can see the name of the project, the date produced. There's the definition of the goals. To successfully launch version 4 by the target date. that was defined within the project budget that was defined. Remember last week, we saw those being defined as the project was being selected, and to support the company's goal of a 5% increase in DecoCam's market share. And notice the goals are very measurable. The target date is measurable, the budget is measurable, and a 5% increase in DecoCam's market share is measurable. So measurable goals is extremely important. Now, the next section is the objectives. This is how are we going to meet our goals? What are we going to do at a very high level? Again, not details, but the objectives of the project are then to the following: update the product information on the website and printed materials, promote the new product through existing communication channels, create a promotional video, and to create trade show materials. A lot of that came from our business case. The budget that we've been given, and we saw that last week, is $60,000. The project sponsor, Arun Singh, that we again, he is the person who will be the sponsor. Sophie Featherstone is our senior project manager, our project manager for the project. Going on, some additional key stakeholders that Sophie identifies. She's identified Casey Sarador, who we've seen in previous case study updates. She's the CEO of the company. And there's a couple of vice presidents that Sophie is aware of, and she's already aware, knows will be key stakeholders. Jackson, who is the vice president of customer support, and Brittany, who is the vice president of product development. Now, there's going to be more stakeholders identified, and we'll see those in our next chapter. But at this point in time, these are the key ones. Some overall project milestones have been identified: the project start, the project approval, when the trade show materials are completed, and the overall project is complete. Now, notice the number of milestones. There's a small number of them relative. This is not a project schedule, which we will do in a future chapter, which will have many, many more activities. This is very high level key milestones. And then as well, we see a couple of key or overall project risks. Again, this is not a complete summary, but these are the risks that are known at the point of the project charter. For example, that there could be errors present in the product launch materials, and there could be delays in the project, which causes the product launch to be late. That's a key risk that we want to be aware of. So you can see that this project charter, it's a relatively short document. It's something that key stakeholders in the organization can read and quickly understand what the project is about. And it's something that is then approved in order for the project to move into the planning phase. The project kickoff meeting is something that normally occurs as the project charter is being created. It's very important to get individuals together, particularly for larger projects. A gathering of the key stakeholders to officially launch or kick off the project is advisable. There's something about getting people together, whether it's in person, whether it's through video or phone conference, is very, very important. This allows key stakeholders to interact and questions or concerns to be raised before the project proceeds into the planning phase. So wherever possible on significant projects, it's really advisable to have that kickoff meeting to say officially, here is the charter, here is the information, any questions, okay, we're going forward. And that's a key step in the process. Those are some of the references that are there for the presentation. Thanks, and we will see you next time.